So my name is Tyler Wells. I'm a Senior Director of Engineering at Twilio. I lead our reliability and response organization, which includes SREs, incident commanders, observability, and a couple of other pieces in there. And I'm here today to talk about a guide to understanding your systems. So why would we want to understand our systems better? Really, the way I look at it and the way we look at it at Twilio is it's a first opportunity to really validate our knowledge of like the entire working system that we put together. So we can give ourselves like the opportunity to ask questions like, what are we observing? What's the work that we've done with our monitoring or alerting that can tell us about what's happening with our systems? Is our system healthy? I mean, I think that's kind of the basic question here. As we're observing our systems and we're working with our systems, especially if it's something brand new, how do we know if that system's actually healthy just by looking at our graphs or our monitors? But before we dig in a little bit more, let's sort of like dig into the story that actually led us to developing this template of how to get to know your systems. So I'm kind of betting a number of teams in the audience have probably experienced this. New teams excitedly developed a new system or product, and they're like ready to take it to production. But first, they sit down with an SRE team, maybe some architects, and they want to run through, in this case, it's just a simple happy path test. If they've done their homework, they sort of show up to the game day with a synthetic traffic generator. Maybe they're using Locust.io or Gatling or something like this. Other times we've tried to do this and teams kind of look at us with blank stares. But for the sake of the story and brevity, we'll just assume that they can actually simulate happy path traffic. So they sit down and they kick it off, and the SREs and the architects start to pose a pretty simple question, like, how do you know everything is working? And in this case, the answer isn't necessarily like, oh, we're getting 200s and everything seems fine. And so somebody like gets a little bit clever, and they say, so this is a web service, right? And they're like, yeah, okay, we've got a web service. It's a RESTful front end, and maybe we have some other things in the back, but primarily it's a request response service. So okay, let's take a look at your metrics and graphs. And so in this case, we're going to say they're using Datadog, and then something like this happens. So they're running their happy path test, and you're like, hey, can you show me requests per second? And they're sort of busy looking around. They show up this page, and it's got a whole bunch of tables and graphs and things it looks pretty and stuff is happening. And you're like, well, where's that? Oh, there it is. I think it's over there in the left-hand corner, and they're pointing at something else. And you're like, okay, great. How about, can I see how many connections you have? And then they skip to another, they go over to another Datadog page, and now it's like, oh, okay, it's over there. So if you see the green, down on the left, it says I've got 435 or something like that. You're like, great. Well, how is the machine performing? Can you actually do you have SLOs? Do you have SLIs? Can you sort of talk about the customer experience? And you pop over and like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? And so, at this point, everyone is kind of scratching their heads. The SREs are thinking to themselves, like, what if this was 2 a.m. in the morning? And all I wanted to know is, all of that painstaking work that the engineering teams have done to, instrument their code and capture, the information around the metrics and everything else like that. Like, I just want to know, is everything okay? And like, I just had to jump between 3 and 4 different dashboards with all of these pretty graphs and like distracting me. And, the cognitive load is high, and I just can't even answer that question. So this was actually a true story. And the unfortunate truth, when we went and ran one of these tests or one of these sort of get to know your systems, this actual team happened to already be in production and had a really hard time telling us if everything was okay. So as we've just experienced that, we knew that we had to do better. It was sort of a stretch to assume that this was common knowledge across all the teams inside of Twilio. At our size, with 27 different offices globally, we've got a huge variety of experience and exposures developing operating platform services. Not everybody is going to kind of get this. Not everyone is going to understand that you've got to invest the time and effort to really understand your systems. And you don't have to necessarily understand your systems from the standpoint of just breaking them all the time. What if I just want to understand them when everything is okay? I mean, that does happen on occasion. We know everything will break, but sometimes everything's just going great. And so what we did, we took a group of SREs and a number of tenured engineers, and we developed a template, which really is sort of a guided tour to getting to know your systems. And so as we put that template together, we came up with 3 main components. And the 3 main components start with service context. So you need to kind of understand what it is that's been built, how it's going to work, and how it's going to serve the user. And we've broken that down into a series of questions. What does the system do? It's a pretty basic answer. I don't know if everybody can always answer that, especially people that are new to the team or people that maybe not have enough of experience. Who is the customer? Like, what are we actually trying to do with this system, and how do they consume what it is that we've actually built? What does that primary use case look like? What is the user flow for the primary use case? How is the customer impacted when the system is degraded? How many teams think about that? How many teams think about when something actually is going off the rails or is impacted? Is the door just shut down on the customer? Do we fail open? Do we have graceful degradation? These are sort of the questions we want to think about. Do we have SLOs? SLOs for us are sort of a new thing, and we're really starting to invest heavily in those things. But have we set those? And we set those in order to achieve what are desired. Do they reflect the customer experience that we want to deliver? Do we have SLIs? Are we able to measure the experience that we want to deliver and feed that into the SLOs? Next up is what we call our pregame checklist. So we've sort of put together the service context. We've answered a lot of those questions. And to be honest, we feel strong that a lot of those questions should be answered sort of pre-development in what we call the blueprint phase. And yeah, you may be more aspirational in that blueprint phase, but really you want to come back and fill those out to the best of your knowledge, specifically around SLOs and performance degradation and things like that. So once we've done all of that, we jump into our pregame checklist. So we all have a toolbox, and that toolbox are the things that we use to operate our systems when they're in production and stage as well. So you have a set of run books. You probably have your PagerDuty services. You have your Datadog dashboards or whatever you're using for your metrics. And then you probably have a set of additional observability tools. You want to make sure you have all of these things set up before you sit down to actually do a get to know your systems exercise. Otherwise, what are you really going to see? I mean, you're not really exercising things from sort of a production standpoint or even what I would consider stage ready standpoint. And again, I'm going to harp on this again. Make sure you've completed that service context. If you don't answer those questions, it's really hard to understand what the expectations are and what you're actually observing. So verify the environment is healthy before you even sit down. Do you have a bunch of things out of memory? Is CPU spiking all over the place? Is the network not healthy? You kind of want to have things in a pretty good place. You want to prepare and validate your load test. How do I actually generate that happy path traffic? You should have all of that stuff set up, or kind of what are you going to be able to do? Not much. And then maybe, just maybe, once you've gone through all the happy path, in the same same system, maybe you want to, or time frame, maybe you want to use Gremlin, do some failure injection. If necessary, it's sort of up to you. Now that we've got that, let's jump over to the actual game day. So we've got to have, like all good processes, we've got to have roles and responsibilities. So we have a game day coordinator. This is the person that actually prepares the game day. They execute the scenarios, and they're going to help identify betterments once we're done with the game day. Then the optional, you could have the on-call triage engineer in case you want someone to be available to respond to alerts. Work through the incident process. If it's a real incident, it's a great time to possibly do that. I mean, this is happy path, so you really shouldn't get any alerts or alarms, but you never know. And then you have attendees. And so these are your observers. They're going to help that you're actually validating the right scenarios. These could be product managers. These could be customer support folks. These could be other members, junior members of the engineering teams. And of course, like the game day coordinators, they're going to be asked to help identify betterments. So now that you've got sort of the three main components of our template, and you're ready to actually run your get to know your systems test, and you're actually ready to sort of put traffic on there. First, before we do that, I'd want to sort of set some expectations. So, like, what are the things that we should get out of this? Are we actually going to see what we expect? Do we have our dashboards or monitors? So, like, if we start to run traffic, what do we actually expect out of this? Can we actually validate our SLIs and SLOs when we put traffic on it? Are we able to sort of hit that 3 a.m. question? Is, like, my system healthy? Is it not? If it's not healthy, do I get the directionality that tells me where I need to look to sort of help triage and fix that quickly? Can I answer a simple question? If it's like we saw earlier where I was bouncing all over the place just to find requests per second, this should be very simple. Are we going to have any SLO violations? Do we expect to have any? If it's again, happy path traffic, we probably shouldn't. Are we going to see alerts? Do we expect to actually see errors? Again, I sort of go back to the case in point. We're putting happy path traffic on our systems. Everything should be good. We just want to validate that we're seeing what we expect. But if we're starting to generate errors, we're probably going to have to take a step back and figure out what's going on, create some betterments. Are the SLI metrics reporting what we expect them to report, or does things look completely crazy? One thing that I think is kind of interesting here is like, once we've done all of this work and we get to that point where can we validate these things? Can we understand our metrics? But if we still have to look at a very senior member, or maybe somebody that was the architect of the piece, to answer a number of questions about the system, that sort of tells me we have a lot of tribal knowledge. And that's definitely something you want to try to eliminate. You want it to be easy enough for the most junior person that's just joined the team to sort of identify, is my system okay? Is my system working the way that I expect? To the most seasoned person. Like, it should be that simple. So now that we've done all that, now we get into the actual learnings. What can we take away from running this exercise? So first off, how did it go? Did we get what we expected? Did we get a whole bunch of alerts? Did we get a whole bunch of alarms? Did nothing happen? I've seen these tests before where we said, hey, we're going to put traffic on these systems, and everybody was excitedly like, oh, here's our graphs. We're looking at these things. This should tell us everything we need to know. So I said, okay, great. Here comes traffic. And it was sort of met with stunned silence. So, I mean, those things will happen, and you have to go back and say, okay, what did we get wrong? Let's take another look at it. Obviously, what can we improve? You know, I would be surprised if the first time you run something like this, you don't walk away with a set of betterments. So create those artifacts, get them into your backlog, write them down, whatever sort of process you follow, and improve upon them. These are things you might want to get better dashboards because, like I said in the previous story, maybe you don't see anything. Are my monitors firing? If they are firing erroneously, I've got a bunch of false positives, probably something I want to fix. What do my run books tell me? Are my run books actually helpful, or are they just, lead me in a misdirection? And again, I always like to go back to that 3 a.m. Can I easily identify the quality that our customers are experiencing? What does it tell me? If I woke up and I don't have 24/7 coverage, I don't necessarily have the luxury of follow the sun. How am I going to be able to use everything that I've done here to help me better identify the experience that our customers are having? And then again, if the answer is no, go back, create your betterments, and run it again. I mean, there's no harm in running this a number of times before you get out into production. I'd much rather spend the time and effort understanding my systems on my dime than understanding our systems on our customers' dime, when they may be hitting SLA violations, when they may be hitting us for chargebacks because we didn't do a good enough job to understand the things that we're running in production. So with all that being said, I kind of leave you with a couple of things. So first, I think to know your systems is to love your users. Deeply understanding your systems is why they come to you, why a customer will place their trust in you and develop upon your platform. If you deeply understand your systems, you know how to run your systems, it shows and expresses your love for your users. And we always want to do that at Twilio. And then, use this template. I found it very easy once we'd actually put it together. We found a number of teams sort of organically starting to gravitate towards it before we'd actually announced it. So they'd gotten wind of it, and we brought it to them and said, take a look at it, give it a try. We've iterated it on a number of times, but maybe it doesn't work for you. Maybe you want to have more chaos injected in there from the very beginning. So obviously create your own, but highly suggest that, it's a great opportunity for you as the team to operate your systems in a safe environment and sort of a non-stressful environment, to build up that muscle memory, to understand your systems if things go right or even if things go wrong. And I, highly suggest teams, take this opportunity just to get better at their operations. That being said, thank you very much. And I appreciate spending some time with me right before, for some of you, lunch on the West Coast. And for the rest, you may have been here for quite a while, but thank you again and appreciate the time.
So we're having already the questions start populating. I think the number one question that folks are going to want to know, and like we already have it on here, is where can we find this template that you just shared? Like, it was a perfect storylining from being able to ask the right questions to what should we actually be monitoring? What do we do with this data? How are we proactive about it?
Sure. I'm going to see if I can open source it. If I can, I will be more than happy to. I don't personally, I just presented pretty much the gist of the entire thing. So I don't think this should be secret sauce, right? So I would be more than happy to work with you guys after this and just be like, here, you guys can have it. I think a long time ago, I remember giving something to Colton that we developed that was just like, not this type of template, but something different. And I was just like, look, it'll make everybody, I hope it makes everybody better. Take it. So yeah, if I can, I will. I don't think it'll be any sort of an issue. I'll scrub it just to make sure I've got nothing sort of, I don't know, secrets, whatever. But yeah, I can. Let's figure that out. I'd be happy to do that.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I know that folks are always kind of like, all right, I get the concept of chaos engineering, but where is this roadmap of what do I actually need to ask, or how do we actually develop all of the engineers to have these mental models and kind of ask the right questions to build better models? So I know I'm going to be pointing a lot of folks to this recording of the talk. The next question that we have coming in, can you add more color on how you ensure that your most junior employee can answer questions about the state of your systems? How do you actually do this at Twilio?
Let them run it.
Just short and simple answer. Let them run it. I love it.
Let them run it. I mean, the best way to do it is to, not necessarily like I'd say it's like you throw them in the fire, right? Because, we're probably doing this in stage, or maybe we're doing this in dev. I want people to be very comfortable with operating their systems. I want them to be comfortable with the chaos and the failure that is at times part of operations. And I think the best way to learn is by doing, and let them get hands-on and let them take you down the journey of how they interpret the systems, of how well they know it. And I think as you get from maybe somebody that's a junior that's maybe isn't quite doing full feature development yet, but is sort of just getting into it, and then maybe gravitate to say somebody that's more maybe mid-level. And so, they're actually doing maybe a full feature. Say, okay, you've got a new system, you've got a new feature coming out. Let's go get to know your feature, and let's see how it works. And do you have the right SLIs? Have you captured those correctly? And go ahead, sorry.
Do you think that the format for that pairing of the mid-senior to the junior engineer, do you think that should be in a game day format? Do you see it as one-on-one pairing? How would you recommend folks go about something like that?
I mean, I think you always have an opportunity to do both. I kind of like the gamification of it. One thing that we used to do in earlier days, we would create kind of a red team and a blue team, and we would pit them against each other to figure out who could, detect it first, and what tool they used to detect it, and then who could, identify and then resolve it afterwards. And so that was some fun stuff that we used to do. But I think you probably want to have some combination of both, because not everyone is going to be comfortable from the very beginning. They've just joined. It can feel a little bit intense. And so I think, having senior folks that are willing to invest the time and the effort to sit down with maybe that more junior engineer and say, hey, let's just go do one of these. Let's just go carve out a couple of hours and we'll just run one ourselves. We have the environments to do that. The systems are there and running. We have the tooling. Why not take advantage of it?
I 100% love that. Just go ahead and do it. I know that when I got started in chaos engineering, I got blessed in getting thrown into on-call my third week as an intern. And that was the first time. But it's if you wouldn't have given me those opportunities, I wouldn't be the great engineer I can be now. So it's definitely about giving folks those opportunities that they may have not had in the past.
And I think it'll really sort of codify that operator mindset that you want, right? You want people to think as they're developing something, it's hey, great, not only am I thinking about how my customer is going to actually consume this, but how am I going to operate this that when they're consuming it, they're going to get the best experience. And when something does go wrong, because we know it will, what are the things that I can capture that's going to give me that directionality to say oh, this is going off. I know exactly what that is.
Are you saying that developers shouldn't be saying it's ops problems now?
No, we don't play that game. That is definitely not, sort of not our values at Twilio. We think everybody has to be an owner operator. We want that sort of shared responsibility, even between our SRE teams and product engineers. We foster a partnership. We don't foster a sort of throw it over the wall mentality. We're there in partnership to say, hey, here's what we're really good at, and we're going to try to help your product engineering pieces, your systems, be really good at it as well.
That is amazing. Yeah, that's how I would love for this conference to continue inspiring folks to push the industry to do that. You have to come together and partner together. SRE, devs, ops, whatever your organization calls them. It's you're in it together.
Absolutely. I mean, it is our shared responsibility to, build trust deliver trust for our customers. And the only way to do that is, I feel it's got to be that strong partnership.
So our next question is, do you see a difference in how people write code after they've started running experiments and doing game days?
Absolutely. Absolutely. that light bulb moment when it's like, gosh, I didn't really think about that. Like, yeah, I should probably go back and I thought it was really cool just to log it. Yeah, I have to log, so I'm just going to log everything. But, then all of a sudden you realize you're like, gosh, I was logging all that stuff, or I was sending all these metrics, or I was generating these events that when something was actually going wrong, all that time and work that I did because I thought that graph would show what I was supposed to see, I saw nothing. And it's like, I can tell a very funny story, and I was kind of hinting at it earlier in my talk, is back when we first developed the programmable video product line, and we're getting ready for our first release. So we sit down to do our game day, and it was the very first one. And, my team, we said, okay, here are all the systems that are sort of in the dependency tree. Here's where we're going to inject failure. What's going to happen? We started asking all those questions. What do you think is going to happen? And so, everybody would sort of put their hypothetical, what will happen? I'd say, okay, what graph is going to show us that what you say is going to break? So we put it up we had 2 big giant screens in our conference room. And so we had that up there, and I said, okay, let's go. And so then we started injecting, some sort of fault, and we were using Gremlin, and nothing happened. So we're looking at this graph, and they're like, yeah, that's going to tell us everything. If it goes wrong, that's what's going to happen. And so I switch over and I said, okay, let me pull up this other thing. And okay, here's our end-to-end test. All of our end-to-end tests are failing. They weren't in that particular system. They were saying, hey, these are the indicators that we're going to see. And so it was like, okay, kind of stopped. All right, let's stop it. And, everybody sort of came together, let's figure out, okay, what are we missing? And then they kind of ran off and did a little bit of work. And then, we just ran it again. And we just kept doing that until, it wasn't scary. It was just sort of, we had that muscle memory, and it became very comfortable for us.
Yeah, I think muscle memory, it's one of the biggest, second biggest wins that you get with chaos engineering. Number one being learning, but that number two of muscle memory of I know exactly out of all the 4 dashboards that we have at the company, or the 4 monitoring observability tools, I know exactly where to go. I know what dashboard to look to. I know where the run book is. I know how to call the person that is engaged in communications for incidents. If you're not ready, if you're not ready during a game day, you're going to be definitely not ready when you're actually dealing with an incident. That's going to be costing a lot of money.
Yeah, especially when you're under stress. I mean, it does, let's be honest. I mean, when your customers are hammering your customer support, they're beating you up on Twitter. So these are things you don't want to be blowing. You don't want to have happen. And now it's let's just say it's 8:00 at night, and you're like, gosh, I'd rather be with my family having dinner, or out with my friends, and all of this is happening. I mean, that's just a lot of stress. And if you haven't practiced this, if you haven't gotten comfortable with it, if you don't understand your tools, you don't understand your systems, you don't know where to look. It makes it really hard, and it's not fun.
I've been there. I know so many companies that are there, and it's we know that it feels scary to get started, but it's definitely not. Even just starting by testing, alerting, making sure your team knows where runbooks are, you're caring more about your engineers. You're less likely to burn, have them burn out or have pager fatigue. So it's all for the best.
Agree, 100%.
So I know that we're having more questions pop in, but I know that we can continue chatting forever.
Sure.
So I'm going to guide folks to start posting the rest of their questions over in the Q&A channel that we have for Tyler. That channel is going to be QA-Tyler-Wells. And with that, we would love to thank you for being a speaker at ChaosConf. What an amazing talk. I can't wait to tell my network about this as a template, how we have seen folks implement chaos engineering and give the engineers the keys of how to find context and care about their customers.
Great. Thank you so much. And I really feel honored to be part of this, and really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Loved having you. Thank you.